it's Nicole and welcome back to my channel. I'm really excited for today's video because I've been repotting orchids all throughout the month of March. Today is March 30th and I'm happy to report that we are on orchid number 100. So I saved an easier orchid for last just because I don't want to struggle with my last few. And I'm going to walk you through the repot and talk through how I handled all these repots throughout the entire month of March. As you guys are watching this video, I'm actually away for a couple of days, so I wanted to get this up so that you guys had some content. And I just wanted to share my experience in repotting 100 orchids in less than a month. So I'm going to soak this orchid and come back and we'll get started. Alrighty, so this orchid is the Phalaenopsis schilleriana. We have repotted this orchid a while back when I got it as a seedling last summer, and it's come a really long way. I believe it had just 2 leaves when I first got it, and now you can see it's pushed out additional leaves, and it's got some roots that are coming out of the sides of the pot. So I'm going to show you how it looked before so you guys can see the before and after. This is about 9 months of growth, and I'm really happy to get it into a larger 4-inch pot. What I like about these orchids is that they have really cool roots, so you could see that they're flat, unlike other Phalaenopsis type orchids, which is great. So I've soaked this orchid. It's been in my care for 9 months, and it's grown some additional leaves. So what I really like about this orchid is that it's got beautiful pink flowers. This is a really nice species, and the roots are also a little different. You can see that they're flat instead of round. So I have another one called the Phalaenopsis philippinensis, and it also has these like kind of flat roots. They're kind of jaggedy too. They're really cool. Looks kind of like a snake. Well, anyway, we're going to be repotting it. I chose to save something easy for last so that I can enjoy it. So I wanted to repot my orchids in one shot with a large collection. It can be really overwhelming, so my thinking is I just wanted to get it out of the way and make sure that I didn't have to worry about anything. Now, I'm not going to be completely done because there's still a few that need to get done, but I'm going to take my time with those. The goal of doing 100 was to get the majority of my collection done and build some momentum to basically just get through everything. So once you start, you can keep going and it's not so bad. And that's what I found. So as I'm about to remove this, it looks like we have these roots have really adhered to the side of the pot. So I'm going to soak it a little while longer, then we can free the roots. All right, now that's much better. I had to use a knife to kind of like gently pry that off, but we'll see if there's anything else stuck in here. And it looks like we have some roots on the bottom that I'm going to be really, really careful with. So let's see. So when I got this orchid, it didn't have too many roots in the beginning, but I'm so happy to see that it's grown pretty nicely. Now, this hasn't been in this pot for too long, but I think it's a good idea, since I don't want to be repotting too much, to just go ahead and put it in a larger pot so that I don't have to deal with it later on. Oh, nice. We have a nice new root tip coming in. That's nice. I'm really happy for this root system. So yeah, when I first got it, this died, but the bottom roots were alive. So I kept them, but it was wobbly in the pot for a while. So I think I just can't overwater this too much, just to be careful. But anyway, back to repotting these orchids. I aim to do 5 per day. So I got a late start, but I figured, okay, 5 per day, 20 days, I can get it done. And look at me here with my last orchid. And we are 1 day ahead of schedule. So it really did help. Once you get started and you decide to move forward with a lot of repots, you really do get moving. I found that it was easier to just do repots that were similar. So if I put stuff in moss, I would repot 5 orchids in moss together, whereas if I was repotting with Leca, I would just do Leca that day. And then I mixed up the challenging repots with the easy repots. So I had some Phalaenopsis orchids that were really difficult to repot, and I kind of once you do something like that, you just kind of get sick of repotting, and then you start getting a little bit more rough, and you start patience. So I was cognizant of that, and what I did was I would mix up maybe one hard repot per day with 4 easy repots per day. If I had a lot of energy, I went ahead and did over 10 repots. If I didn't have any energy, I didn't do any repots that day. So it was kind of like I was holding myself accountable by doing more when I had more energy and nothing when I had no energy and I knew I'd be rough with the orchids. Repotting is relaxing, but the reality is if you have a very large collection, it's a lot of work to maintain all of it, and you can get frustrated. So I say if you have a large collection, it's best to either work on it very slowly if you really enjoy repotting, or you could do what I did and just crank them out of the way, but don't do too much at once. Just take it easy. You don't want to get too rough with the roots, especially with a hard repot. There were some repots that I started going into where the repot I thought would take half an hour and it ended up taking me 2 hours. So, it's a really big test of patience, and when you just break it up, you walk away when you notice that you're getting a little bit too rough with your orchid. It's normal. Like, you're working on something for so long, it doesn't want to free up. Your inclination is to pull a root. You might break roots. You might get more aggressive. So just be mindful of that and keep everything mixed up so that you have easy and hard, easy and hard. This one is nice and easy, so we're going to go ahead and pot this little baby up. Now I could probably reuse some of that moss and take this off, but I'm just going to go ahead and use fresh moss. This has been in there 9 months. Normally I wouldn't repot so soon, but I'm not looking to touch this for a while, and we had those roots growing outside of the pot. So I'm going to take a little bit of moss, keep it nice and fluffy, and we're going to gently place it in. And you guys know how I repot my Phalaenopsis type orchids. I like to keep it gentle and fluffy, and I don't pack it in too tight. And this setup will also ensure that it doesn't need to get watered as much, because with that pot I had to water every 2 days, which was a lot. So I get a benefit of having to water less with this new setup. The bigger the pot, the more water it holds. So I'm so happy. I'm pretty much done with this. It was a lot of work, but it was worth it. In hindsight, would I do it again? Yes, I think so. So what I've learned with growing my orchids is that when you're putting things into Leca, number one, try to start out with pots that are larger, or else you're going to outgrow your setup really fast and you'll have to repot more than you would have if you had put it in a big container to begin with. So that's one lesson that I learned. Another lesson that I learned is that the better the quality of materials that you use, the less likely they are to break down quickly on you. So I was using this Best Grow New Zealand sphagnum moss on a lot of my Phalaenopsis orchids. Some of them were almost close to 2 years in their pots, and it did not break down. And you could tell because a lot of times broken down sphagnum moss is smelly, and I found that a lot of these were fine, and they were outgrowing their pots, so they had to come out of the pots, but the sphagnum moss held up really well. So if you use quality products, it's going to last much longer, and I think that's worth it when you think about how often you repot. There's some materials that may degrade faster, so that's something to keep in mind as well. I'll also say that I underestimated how much materials I needed. I had to get new moss because I was out, so that kind of slowed me down, and I ran out of Leca pretty quickly. So in my 100 repots, I'd say it was probably 60% Leca repots, and the rest were moss or bark or coconut husk. I had to replace the Leca another time. So I went through 2 25-liter bags of Leca, and I ran out of pebbles. So always have your materials ready to go when you're repotting. And it's best to prepare because a lot of what's available last year might not be available this year just due to supply shortages and stuff like that. So there were some pots I was looking for. I could not find them. So if you find something you like, it's best to stock up on it, especially if they're pots, a specific material. It's, you know, it's been getting pretty expensive. Something I also did was one of my friends bought a whole kilo of sphagnum moss and we ended up sharing it. So if you could split with a friend or if you can split with some folks in your local orchid society, it really helps because these bricks of sphagnum moss, they're getting pricier. And if you can buy them in bulk from a reputable seller, it'll save you if you can split that up with some friends. So that's something that I also started doing. Well, anyway, guys, this Phalaenopsis schilleriana is all done. I can't wait to see it grow. It's got a nice new growing root tip, and I'm going to make sure to avoid watering the crown when I water it. And I'm so glad to be done here. Repotting for me is generally pretty relaxing. Like, I really enjoyed doing this one. But when you have a really large collection, it can be so tiring. So let me know down in the comments how you guys handle your repots, if you do them slowly over time, if you have, say, a collection of over 100 orchids. I have about 200, so it's a lot of work. And I just decided to bite the bullet and get as much done as I could. I did find that once I started, I just didn't stop. After work, I would just start repotting and I would get on a roll. If I just did one every day, something like that, I wouldn't really build the momentum to really get through everything. And if I spent my whole weekends repotting 30, 40 orchids, I would just be so exhausted at the end. So I'm curious to hear about how you guys repot your very large collections, if you have them. And if you have a small collection, I think that's great because then you can really care for these orchids. When you repot them, you're going to be very gentle with them. You're not going to burn out. If it makes sense, like once you do a difficult orchid, it's very tiring to get to 5 more difficult repots. So if you have small collections, you could really give them your attention and really take care of them well. It's when you have really large collections that it can get really, really tiring. So when you see big collections, don't think automatically that you need to have all the orchids in the world. You can have a really enjoyable collection just by keeping it small and manageable, and it kind of lowers the stress levels. When you have to deal with a lot of plants, it can make your stress levels go up, not only with repotting, but if you get pests or anything like that, you have to treat more orchids. When you have to flush them, you have more orchids. So I'm at a point where I'm downsizing a little bit to something that's a little bit more manageable for me. I think I got too many. I can manage what I have now, but I think it'll be optimal if I just size down a little bit, if I didn't buy every orchid that I saw. So I'm at the point where I've given some away and I'm very happy with that. I think next year it'll be so much easier to deal with these. Some of them are going to stay in the pots for 2 years, and I think they're going to do well. Well, anyway, guys, if you want to check out all of the orchids that I repotted, follow me on Instagram. I do have a story highlight of all of the orchids that were repotted by number. And I will catch you guys next time. Thanks for watching. Bye.